good morning, good evening, good afternoon, however you prefer to say hi. So we are here to have some fun and talk about strategic drift. So if you've not met me before, I'm Patrick. I'm on the solutions team at Tempo. I've been here for about 2.5 years doing all kinds of silly things. Most of them involve listening heavily and then trying to only say the important stuff at the end. But today I just get to say silly things in between much more insightful people than myself. So I'd like to welcome the rest of the crew, and we'll go in order here. So Vando, you want to give a quick introduction for yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Patrick. Nice to meet you all. I'm Vando Gonçalves. I work as a solution architect at Ecor, where we usually help organizations to close this gap between the strategy and execution. In practice, that usually means that, leaderships, they have good strategy, good tools, and we help them to figure out why neither of those are producing good results. And that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today.
Awesome. Thank you, Vando. And Michiko, you're up next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Michiko Quinones, and I'm a principal consultant with Praecipio. And I've been in this space, agile, lean portfolio management, now strategic portfolio management for about 20 years. I specifically work on helping organizations build the systems that they need that would link strategy to delivery. And in that sphere, I've worked in the rallies, the Jira lines, and Tempo to do that. And now I'm really looking at how to structure that data so that it can be read for AI. I'm really excited about that and starting to see some real positive things happen out in the industry. So I'm really excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Patrick.
Of course. Pleasure as always, Michiko. Nick, have at it.
Great, thanks. So my name is Nick Sommerfeld, Director of Client Solutions here at ISIS Technology. I don't know, I think I'm coming up on 7 years here in the ecosystem, longer than that. But I have done it all. I've been a consultant. I've been in account management on the sales side. Right now, all of our solution engineers, pre-sales, solution ideation falls under me. So on a day-to-day basis, it's hearing from our clients, understanding their desired outcomes, their issues, and crafting those solutions direct for them. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are most welcome. And for anybody listening, you probably heard a trend, and I think everybody's answer, the word solutions, came up. And is it in all of our titles too? How about that? And one quick call out. Those of you that are here are probably familiar with how things work in the Atlassian ecosystem, but just in case you're not, since Tempo is hosting the webinar, Tempo is a software company, right? We make software products, software solutions to help out with things. And that's great, right? But getting all the way there usually involves processes, embedding, and going through, go back. And going back. Now you guys have the answer to the second most expensive drift. So that's why we have solutions partners here on the call, right? Everybody on this call or one of their colleagues was interviewed as part of the Tempo State of SPM survey that Forrester did for us. So we're going to be talking about the impacts that they see out in the real world. So we'll start out with the first question. What is the most expensive drift? And if you read the title of the webinar, you probably know, right? Anybody want to try and guess in the chat? You guys can guess out loud as well. Strategic drift, that's right. So the second most expensive drift, right? That is, now we can go, Sam. Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift. They destroyed 249 high-performance cars.
Wow.
So, which 249 high-performance cars is still second most because strategic drift has major implications. So now we go to the next slide and talk a little bit about the State of SPM report. So what is strategic drift, right? It means we have, it's kind of intuitive, but it means we have a strategic plan, we have initiatives we've set forth, and then the real world kicks in. Rear wheels pop off as we're drifting around a corner, and we got to fix it live and make things happen. So the cost of that is something like 1 in 3 strategic projects fail to deliver meaningful ROI. That's enormous. It's a huge percentage of work that is busy work, really. It's like when you're in school doing worksheets because the teacher's out and they just have something for the substitute to put on. like a third of the work that organizations are doing intended to be strategic initiatives is basically just worksheets to fill time. And that's not because there wasn't ever an intent for it to be valuable, but there are, gaps in communication of what needs to be done. There's sunk cost fallacy. There's work that continues after the organization has learned that it should be skipped. There's gaps in being ability to do adaptive planning and modify plans as things go on. So this is sort of the quantitative aspect of what we're going to be talking about today. And Nick and Michiko and Vando are going to be going through some of the qualitative aspects of where they see this, like what this, to go back to that wheel falling off, where the rubber meets the road, right? And how do you keep those wheels on while you're drifting around a corner? So we'll talk about the alignment illusion, which this one is huge for me. The 90% of organizations claim that they're alignment, but cross-team alignment is the number one barrier. And when they would dug deeper in the survey responses, only 10% actually had strategic alignment. Mm-hmm. And it almost made me wonder, like, is alignment just like the new buzzword for synergy, right? Are we just going back to 2010 and just picking a new word there? So before we go any further, what are for panelists, what are your thoughts on that, on alignment being just a new buzzword versus how it's actually used impactfully?
Well, I would say that, alignment is a buzzword. It is about discipline. As you were talking, I was thinking about a company that I was really familiar with where they had this enormous OKR system that they would do at the beginning of their year, their strategic year. And then theoretically, all of the people who were involved would have to line up to the ultimate OKR from their leadership. So in theory, everyone was aligned. But in practice, what happened was, because they didn't have, each group operated in its own silo. Each one was allowed to develop its own definition of what a large project was. And each of them were in different systems. And what happened was that it would take them a month to put together a PowerPoint that would begin to describe the very nice OKRs they started with at the beginning of the year. And you saw by the end of the year layoffs, right? Because they were not able to execute on the beautiful OKRs they had because of all of that stuff in the middle. So it's an illusion. It's a front face. Oh, we have our OKRs. We are all aligned. And then when you get down to, well, are your systems aligned? Is your data readable to AI? Are you able to quantify how much it's going to cost to do something? That's when we fall. And then that's when you see, well, layoffs and other kinds of implications. I don't know if my other panelists have seen similar things.
Yeah, and I mean, alignment, most companies start out aligned whenever that conversation starts. If it's at the beginning of the year, it's the beginning of a quarter. I mean, even the beginning of a smaller time chunk like a sprint or a handful of those, it deviates almost immediately. And that generally doesn't get communicated in an effective way. So I think it is a buzzword. I think, and it's not even just from a planning perspective, it happens everywhere. And sorry for like the agile purists, but that you get unaligned very quickly, even in those more rigid functions, in those ceremonies. They do their best to keep everyone aligned, but unless you're keeping your finger on the pulse daily, weekly, across an entire organization, which is tricky. It's not to say that this is like the easiest thing to solve, but you're going to have misalignment as you move away from the date that you were once aligned. It's going to happen.
Checks out. I like it. Vando, go ahead.
I was going to say, kind of connecting with what Michiko and Nick said, when you're looking at the planning and, siloed planning specifically, many times the silo does not look exactly, as just one part of the organization all talk to another. It might look like a team that, has all the data and is not sharing with outside the team. So not anyone outside the team can see the data. So, I've worked with organizations, and every team, they have a dashboard, and the leadership still can answer, where's our capacity going? No, that's a silo. The data is there, but they don't have the visibility. So as Michiko said, I don't think that the first step is the technology. It's agreeing, where the main question you're trying to answer, to define that. So before you get integration on the systems, before you make configuration on the tools, what is the one decision that leadership needs to make better? So, and then we can start working backwards from that. So most of SPM implementations, they fail because of that, because they start with the platform and never define what's the decision that needs to be taken. And when you're talking about more especially now that we have heavily AI involved organizations, data shows, that I think that is on the report as well, if I can recall correctly, organizations that they can reallocate resources quickly, under 2 weeks, they grow twice of the rate that the silo grow twice of the rate of the silo ones. That, that's the window that matters. AI tools, including everything we're seeing on the market, they are making this planning window, this adaptability window, to shrink even more, make this window even smaller. But if the AI, cannot communicate across the silos, if the data is not connected, the AI is just analyzing one small piece of a bigger puzzle that organizations have.
Can I piggyback on what Venda said just a little bit? Because I think that one of the most important things that hit me was leadership needs to know what the right decision is to make. And what often happens, and regardless of the tools that you're using, what are the questions leaders are being asked to opine on? So when you start a strategic planning, you'll have some type of revenue forecast. You'll have some type of key metric that you're trying to hit. But then what often gets communicated when you surface anything back up is the progress of the work. We don't go back to say, how is the work impacting the KPI we were supposed to be looking at? That is a key. Leaders need to start asking those questions. They need to start saying, okay, great. I see that you've got, capacity. I see that you have gotten your budgeting all correct. I see that we have 30% complete on Epic so-and-so. But has this actually brought in any revenue with the stuff that you've already pushed to production? And that is, if leaders aren't asking that, then the people who are doing the work aren't setting themselves up in the systems to answer that. And that I also believe is a major reason why we get this drift. We get a huge strategic drift because of these problems that exist. So just wanted to kind of echo and co-sign my panelists that, yeah, I'm seeing it all over the place.
It's a great call out. Yeah, because if you don't have a reason behind the work, right, and you're reporting on progress, it's just a dashboard.
Just a dashboard.
That doesn't help anybody. It actually, if it's just a dashboard, it wastes time because people love to look at information, and try to extract signals from it. And when there's not meaning, like a KPI, or when alignment is just a buzzword, right? It's not a culture, then it's just a dashboard. And one of the things that now I'm going to oversimplify this statement here, and then Nick, I saw you come with me. I'll let you comment there. So, tempo. One of the findings that we had in the report was organizations with a integrated SPM solution performed almost twice as well in pretty much every category. And one of the things we saw was when organizations had 2 or more Tempo products, it was like somewhere between a 40 and 60% increase in their success rates on any given aspect. And then that does not mean just having Tempo installed solve that problem, right? That's why this is a panelist discussion. It's, correlation is not causation. What is more likely happening is organizations that have capacity planning, financial tracking, program management, when they have those all in place, it means there's that awareness that we need to look at every layer of the portfolio, every aspect of that. So it's being treated holistically as a portfolio and program management solution, right? And that's where that comes in more deeply. As we mentioned, we'll send out the State of SPM survey. So the full report's going to go out here. The deck that we're sharing here will also go out. So if anybody's QR code happy, by all means, scan this and you'll get it now. And but you'll also get a copy of this afterwards. So, Nick, actually, Sam, we can go ahead and stop sharing. We'll just go back to talking heads at this point, right? We just had the one slide, right? This is a conversation. So, Nick, you came off mute there. What'd you want to add there?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to wrap the alignment illusion piece. Like, alignment is kind of a vibe at the moment, and that's really where even top down or bottom up is how people are going to look at it. Everyone feels like they're aligned because you can see work being done. It's generally targeted towards an initiative or something that a leader has set, but that's generally where it ends. So everyone feels aligned, which is good. When you start to present where people are working and what they're doing, what they're delivering on a dashboard, like we talked about, which is a good thing, it's still left up for interpretation. And that's sort of where we see that split of understanding the outcomes that that the alignment is driving to, and is it actually happening? So it's not to say that folks aren't aligned when they're having these issues. It's just that it's probably being interpreted a little differently because it is up to whoever is looking at what's been completed or certain KPIs, certain metrics. If it's not telling the right story, if it's just numbers, like I've never met an executive that doesn't like a spreadsheet. I've never met, a consultant in this case, or let's just say an engineer who hates them when it comes to tracking their work from an initiative perspective. So there's always those opposing forces. And coincidentally, like that's where specific SPM tools thrive, is making sure in the middle that everything is translated the same way and everyone's reading and interpreting what's going on the same way.
Perfect. And I think you said AI, or not AI, alignment is a vibe right now. For the next team event with the Tempo hats at the booth, we were doing the partner logo or partner badges or patches. Alignment as a vibe should definitely be submitted as a badge. I would wear that. All right. So let's talk about the cost of siloed planning. So if alignment is a vibe and it's a buzzword right now, and how is a silo different from that image I'm thinking of from Visio diagrams of a database, silo from 15 years ago, right? How is siloed, put that into real words for us. What does a silo look like in practice? And what's the first step to breaking it down?
Well, I can think of a couple companies that I've seen recently where the silo is that the systems, it's easy to get siloed when you don't have systems that surface the things that need to be surfaced. And so I think what happened, so for example, you'd mentioned that Tempo helps solve problems in terms of getting out or getting to alignment. And I think the reason that it does that is that it normalizes and makes speedily available the work, the labor cost, the cost of something, and also the alignment of things. And so I think because it does that, then we solved the problem of the silo, right? But there are many companies out here who still have a Workday or some type of HRIS system that's not connected into the actual work system. And I think that is probably the cause of many, many silos, because now what you're having is your labor cost being really different from what's going on with your work. And I think that we need to solve those connection problems. And you'll see that that is where many companies are starting to move now. They're starting to move in, we need to connect all of this stuff. So what happens then is that if you have these reports coming out of different places, money's coming out of different places, and that's an initial cost, right? We have no idea how much something costs to do. And so you now have a spreadsheet that says one thing and a group of work data that says something else. And so then into the middle of that is not only the fact that you don't know how much something really costs because the two aren't connected, but also the time it's taking you to even rectify that, to get to the point where you understand what the full cost of something is. So I think on your other slide, you showed Okay, this is costing companies millions of dollars. And I would say, yes, it is. And then let's not even get into the fact that you can't even determine what stuff is capitalizable. So now you're like, okay, I don't even know if we could do tax savings on this. So I would say that's where I think the heart of it exists. And if you can make those connections and at least start to get that more quickly, right? What are the tempo tools do? Many other tools do that. Now what's happening is at least you're getting that data quickly, because what's happening is the real question is, are we making the goal that we thought? And nobody can even take time for that because they're so busy in the churn of all that other stuff.
Especially, do you think AI is making that easier or harder?
I mean, AI is going to make it easier because it's going to make it easier for people to build the report, right? Or to be able to extract the data. But what we have to be careful of is that AI understands your taxonomy. So if you have a siloed organization and they're calling an epic something that takes 5 days, and you have somebody over here and they're calling an epic something that takes a year, your AI is not going to be able to make sense of that taxonomy. So what has to happen across your organization is you have to start aligning on what these definitions are. And then you feed that to the model. Then the model says, got it. Okay, now I can answer this question of how many people are working on thing X and how long it's going to take. But if you don't give, you don't give the AI that guidance, if you don't build your taxonomy and you don't have the governance around it, you will then still spend time being the human in the loop. You're going to have to see if it's right. It'll look pretty. It's going to be a really good looking report. It's going to be well written. You're going to love it. But you know what? Is it right? You can only feel that confidence if you have a governed taxonomy. So I think that's, yes, I'm 100%. I can tell you things I'm doing now that I get done in a day. It's unbelievable. But it's all based on governed data. So I think that's where we have to go.
Yeah, and I agree with Michiko that, governing the data and having the data is pretty important. And another thing that I truly believe that AI is going to accelerate is not just how you do the planning, but how fast you surface those errors, and this discrepancies between different organizations. And kind of doubling down on what I mentioned previously, nowadays, the silos, I don't see just, kind of different departments siloed. Many times the departments, they are integrated, but the silo comes from the data. And again, as Michiko said, many times you have, the data in your work system and you get the reports just from that. But you're going to have, an external HRS system. You're going to have, another external finance system. You're going to have another CRM. If you don't have all this data connected to get the information from all those places, of course, the data is going to differ. And one of the words that I, heard a lot recently at the last event I attended is context. And connecting all those data, it's, where you're going to get the full context of your organization.
So
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I was going to make a stupid joke. You're going to say something better.
That's generally what happens when I get involved. All right, so like the way I look at silos, especially from an ROI perspective, like I think most organizations consider silos or look at silos as something that hurts execution. But it's really more about the pivoting. It slows down the decision making, which is kind of a tease for the next thing we'll talk about. But like that's really where costs start to skyrocket, is the inability to make a decision, and you're just plugging along to an outcome that is not right or no longer necessary. And even when you inject AI into that, like I feel like it helps the individual team, but then it worsens the siloing. Everyone's doing their own thing, and if they're not together, they're still siloed. Everyone's doing their own AI thing. It's just going to compound the issue. Now, could it help? Could it solve? Sure, but I think the coming together, the de-siloing or the knocking down of those silos probably has to happen first. And it's not like, I think the misconception about siloing is that it feels like a lack of collaboration. Everyone's sort of in their own world, doing their own thing, refusing to, to work with others, or just not cross-functional, cross-collaborating. But I think it's more just the symptom of how projects are run and how there's like a lack of visibility on an overarching like initiative or project. So everyone's got their own roadmaps, their own definition of success, or the reasons, the why behind the work that they're doing. And it's not just from an engineering perspective, right? Marketing can be doing one thing, sales could be doing one thing, engineering another. It spirals real fast, and the cost comes from not making a decision fast enough to turn that around, as opposed to time wasted because folks are doing their own thing.
It's a good lead into the cancellation paradox, which we'll move to in a second. But I'll also note here, you guys all kind of hinted at the shadow AI concept, like where people are being pushed to try to be more efficient and more effective. And because it is so new, it's very easy for different organizations or different departments to make different decisions, which is how you have to start, right? Like, let people get their hands dirty, figure it out, and then you define the governance after that happens. We're still in that stage where organizations are still defining what governance looks like, what models are right for them, where they have raise your hand if you've ever seen 19 note takers join a call, and 3 of them are from the same person, right? Like, that's still all being sorted out. Like, we're going through that at tempo right now. I'm saying, all right, no more using, note taker XYZ because we've settled on note taker A, right? But all these people had accounts out there. And that's just a small representation of that. Large Silicon Valley, we'll say startup, they're, $1 billion company now, but recently spent something like $3.4 billion of their entire 2026 AI budget already. And they don't know if it delivered value. Some of it they might, but it's a big challenge that we need to be thoughtful about, because it can be exacerbated by the process silos between teams. All right, so let's talk about the cancellation paradox. And I want everybody that's listening right now to think of the most productive individual that you've ever worked with. And now think about the percentage of times that they said yes to a request compared to the percentage of times that less productive people say yes. Maybe yourself, maybe you're a people pleaser, say yes to everything. Right? You can't do everything. And that's where the cancellation paradox comes into play, right? Knowing when there's a sunk cost. So I want to let you guys kind of riff on that for a minute. Why does quitting projects actually a sign of maturity? And what do you see? What does good look like when you see organizations evaluating what to stop doing?
Yeah, I think it's that fail fast mentality that a lot of organizations are scared of doing, or can't do because they don't have the visibility or the metrics or the signals to understand when something should be abandoned. I myself say yes to everything, so I get myself into some stressful situations because I want to be involved. I want to do the things. So I definitely understand that. But like, if you can't stop doing something, it's likely because you're not fed the right data to make the decision. And it's likely because you're disconnected from a tracking perspective, a visualization perspective, teams not working towards the proper outcome, the proper result. I see this all the time from like a cleanliness perspective with clients, where they know they really are pretty sure that they need to stop doing this thing, but there is no data to back it up because everyone's doing their own thing. To harken back to some of the other topics we talked about, they are so siloed, they are so fragmented, they aren't aligned, and so there's no, it's a feeling that they shouldn't be doing the thing, but it still feels right from an overall outcomes perspective. But there's nothing saying that they're on the right track or off the track, so they keep going.
Yeah, and I mean, I would just say, I'm thinking back. There's a good question in the chat that I kind of want to address.
Yeah, go
It's
for it.
about, yeah,
Ties
where
ties in nicely to this.
an operational model from a big organization, more than 20K people, where you've seen it in practice work. I have seen this in practice work at a small organization of 2,000 people. And I want to just talk about that for a second because that is literally the last time I really saw it work. I think that we're kind of in a crisis in the American company right now. And that we haven't been, again, addressing whether or not we're asking the right questions. We've come from project management models that ask us to focus on budget and completion. And because in our mental head, we're thinking that we don't do all of our processes around answering the right question. And because our boards and our leaders are separated from the people doing the work and they're not communicating the stress of headwinds there, and that's not getting down to the people doing the work. So there is a kind of a cultural disconnect happening. Where I saw that did not happen was when I was at Rally. This was 12 years ago, maybe 15, dating myself, but Rally was in Boulder. And a lot of that boulderness, if anybody can remember, translated into scaled agile framework stuff, right? There was a lot of how do we do this differently? And what that looked like, and I can tell you I was there, is that the operational model included good, consistent scoring that concluded that was from the beginning of when we started something and looked at revenue or looked at whatever kind of projection and kept that front of mind. And though it was a smaller organization, because they were organized like that, their organizational model and the systems reflected that. And then that got turned into the idea in scaled agile. And I'm not saying this is the only place scaled agile got it from, that you should score your work according to economic indicators, right? That you should have some type of scoring that happens before you even get started. And what Rally did was, because they were doing that, because they took in Pivot or Persevere, which also made it into lean portfolio management models, which is originally Eric Weiss, which is this idea of we're going to do a hypothesis, see if we get it done. If it doesn't work, we're going to drop it. Rally was the only place I saw did that. And they dropped a lot. And that's what's so interesting. And this is why I totally, when I read this review, I mean, the report, I was like, of course, that's the cancellation product. And it was the only place, paradox, the only place I saw where salespeople would confidently go and say, yes, we're delivering that next term. And it would get delivered. And nobody would be like, oh my God, it didn't get delivered. There was this confidence that things were going to happen. And I'm so glad I had that experience, because to this date, and I've been in a lot of different places, I have not had that experience. Now, granted, I am a consultant. The people that call me have problems. Okay. So I'm not in perfect organizations. And maybe some of you are. I would love to hear the operating models that you have. But I think that we have to start asking the right question, and we have to build our cultures around that, and we have to score. Like, we have to score on the right indicators. So, yeah, sorry, I'll get off my high horse now because
You're good.
I'm passionate about it.
It kind of leads into a follow-up question I had on the topic, which is when you cancel work, because you should cancel work when it's the wrong thing to do or when there's more important, right? How do you see, and this question's for everyone, how do you see that propagating out as a communicated decision so that you avoid the whiplash and the employee disengagement that can happen when, let's say I am an individual that's been working on we'll go to the traditional, the blue button, right? I'm working on the new blue button on the website, all the, the jokes about development a few years ago, right? And we find out I've been working on the blue button for 2 months, and we're not going to have buttons anymore. All right, stop your work. Your blue button's not going out. How do you avoid that disconnect? Because employee engagement is one of the strongest indicators of success, right? If people are fulfilled, happy what they're working on, connected with their teammates, you're going to get better outcomes. So how do you take the cancellation paradox and put it in place in a way that it avoids stressing the teams out and encourages them that what we're working on next is a better idea than what we were doing before?
I'd say the main point for that, and honestly, not just for that, for many other issues I see in organizations, is going to be communication. The sooner you communicate, the better, because you're going to have awareness on what you're doing. But to your point, I believe and I've seen what creates even more employee dissatisfaction is, you work on the blue button, you have worked on that blue button for, 3 months, you get that to completion, but you then never see that implemented. You never see that used. So you feel like, that was a waste of my time. I've been working on that, I did my best to do that, and you implemented that. And then, also on the other side, if there's misalignment, you see, the leadership say, so we wanted that, the team was working because we saw them working, but we didn't get to the result, that we wanted. So having this dissatisfaction on both sides increases the employee, actually reduce the employee satisfaction. So doubling on what I said, communication, it's paramount, since the beginning, and have this transparency, connecting, which are goals, which are, your OKRs, which are definitions that you have for the organization for the future, which are the financial objectives you want to achieve, and how's that connected to the work being done, daily, not just, completion of work, but how that is contributing to your bigger goals. Having this visibility and this connection, and the squishy middle, it's paramount for the organization's success.
And I think that's why a lot of, Patrick, to your point, like people get discouraged or there's that whiplash of stopping something, starting something else, is because a lot of those decisions are made, again, without real concrete data. It's that feeling. And so it's hard to justify it to the rest of an organization. So you're sort of scrambling. Not to make something up, but you're scrambling to garner that trust back again, so that folks will, continue on the path with you on this new idea that is better than the first idea that has been stopped. So if you don't have a tool, if you don't have a process that tracks the work and makes those decisions clear, and makes it clear in a way that you can communicate it to the rest of the organization, then I think you run that risk of that exact thing happening when you stop something, when you cancel something and move on to a new thing.
I would also add that I think a motivation killer is just capacity. So when I am over capacitized, when I am working too hard, that is going to kill my motivation no matter what I'm working on. And so, I think one of the great things that we're finding in the newer tools is their ability to kind of have a discussion about capacity. And so the other thing I would say is that we need to think about if we're really doing what and now I'm going to sound like an agilist, but are we doing the practices that happen in Agile? Are we asking ourselves why we're doing something? Are the people who are developing those big ticket items clearly communicating their why? Because if you communicate a why and you stop something, when you stop it, people will also understand, because if, for example, SAFe will tell you, do an MVP and have an hypothesis. Are we clearly doing that hypothesis? Are we clearly saying we're trying to achieve thing X with blue button, right? And it didn't achieve thing X. Then I think it's very clear. Blue button didn't work. I'm okay with shifting out of blue button because we said this is what this is, and then there's again, the question in the chat, somebody mentioned planning rigidity coming from PI plannings. This is where project management moves itself into scaled agile, where we're thinking we have to do exactly what we said, rather than we can drop because we have a hypothesis and it doesn't reach it anymore. So the key thinking that has to happen, that all of these organizational tools and models are asking us to do, is not happening. And that's why you're getting the rigidity within the planning, right? Because the real conversation's not happening. Are people overcapacitized? Can we move something off? Can we make it super intimately clear? I have one other anecdote is that at one point I got to visit Bloomberg, and Bloomberg is all about their terminals. And they sell these terminals. When you walk into the Bloomberg floor, anywhere in the building, you will see these big numbers. So everybody is aware of how many terminals, and this may be changing. This is a couple years ago, because now with AI, I don't know what they're doing with the terminals. But that was what was important. It was made super visible. So just to echo my other panelists here, is that it's not just visible to senior leadership; it's visible to everybody down the chain. And Geraldine had this function called the Y button. And you could take that Y and you could see it if you were working on a story. These days, you can do that fine in Jira or whatever type of system you have. But again, we aren't doing the hard parts, the conversation parts, the MVP parts, and we're not communicating that back out. And that turns into rigidity across the organizations. And I hope whoever's asking this question, I'm hoping giving you some idea. This is the harder people process part, where that is clearly in all of the models. It's clearly there. Do it. How do we make sure people do it?
I think that fits well into the scenario modeling as a way to be more mature with it. I'll give one little tidbit on that too. Generally, it's hard to change culture it's hard to change culture when there's not already a way of representing the reason that we're stopping a project. The best way it can be done is usually in that squishy middle with the people who have the connection to the strategic initiatives, what we're trying to do, and then that upward pressure bound of the capacity, whether it's human, money, AI tokens, whatever, right? The visibility of what we can actually accomplish. So I think one of the reasons that it is hard is the visibility of the impact of change is often overlooked. And when the visibility of the impact of change is overlooked, it's not, and this is why more mature organizations stop doing things. It's because they're able to say it's okay that we're not doing this anymore. We're going all in on a new initiative. Less mature organizations, what you often see is they will try to do the new thing, and we're going to keep doing that old thing, and we're going to do that thing from 3 generations ago, and we're going to do that thing from 4 generations ago. And it comes from a lack of visibility into what the teams are working on and how that bubbles up to whether it's OKRs or outcomes or KPIs, however you think about it at a business language model. So exposing that visibility and allows those conversations to be fostered. So it's not just, hey, look at my spreadsheet, trust it. Instead, it's, hey, look at what I'm building in my program board, and here's what the teams are working on, and here's how I know this is true, and here's the impact that we stop.
Mm-hmm.
So
Another thing, if I might just add to that, Patrick, what I've seen, and I know this is a huge, shift in the way of thinking and the way organizations work. Most of organizations, they do their funding process, their planning process based on projects. So they're funding the projects. So if you get to a point when you say, we're canceling the project, usually, you're going to get people that work on the project afraid, so am I going to lose my job? But I've seen more mature organizations, and a huge recommendation of, instead of funding the project, making sure you're funding the people that are working on those projects, or what I call funding the value streams, because then the people is going to be, let's say, safe, knowing that they are funded, till the end of the year, till the end of your planning cycle, and it doesn't matter specifically if the project they're working on is getting canceled. They are going to be sure they know that next thing to come, the next thing they're going to be work on, it's funded because they are funded and they're going to bring value on that. So that, kind of disconnect that concern of, okay, my project's being canceled, I'm going to lose my job, and nowadays there's a huge afraid that people has.
Yeah.
That's a great insight. All right. So now let's talk about the scenario planning. And this is kind of, I won't say it's I won't say it's the North Star, but it's one of the North, like it's a bright star in the sky to be able to do scenario planning, to understand the trade-offs as you're doing your initial planning and as you've committed to a plan and deciding where you need to pivot. So how do you guys see scenario planning working out both from a process perspective and from a decision-making perspective?
So the first time I see anyone try to do it, it never works. It fails miserably. And obviously I see it mostly in Jira, but the concept is sound outside of just Jira. But the data generally doesn't support the type of scenario planning that you're trying to do. There's almost always cleanliness issues, people not working the same way. I think back to a point earlier of like the taxonomy differences. Unless everyone's working somewhat similarly, calling things the same things, you can't scenario out, at least cross functionally within an organization, maybe within a small team. From a like understanding capacity, or do we need another person in this team to support the work? But if you're trying to look at an overall project, almost always the data is not clean. All tickets aren't sized. All teams aren't associated. And relating that back to Jira, generally we try to do that from a plans perspective, right? If you can't plug your data natively into plans in Jira and run some scenarios, you are not close to mature enough to start thinking about larger tools. Now, if you can, then maybe it's time to graduate towards away from plans and into a specific tool, a dedicated SPM tool that is meant to not only bring in, your data housed in Jira, but maybe you're also pulling from elsewhere to help feed context and other work that's going on. So I've never met a clean instance ready to go day one for scenario planning.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point. And I think what I'm seeing is that, to Nick's point, no Jira instance I've ever seen is like, oh my God, it's pretty. No, it's always been a little funny. So the thing is, and Vando mentioned context. Whatever AI you're choosing to use and whatever system you're using, you can now start feeding it some assumptions. So I think that scenario planning is kind of two things. It's, can we do this in a certain amount of time? So we're trying to figure out if we can meet a date. That's part of, like, we're moving things back and forth and dropping things in and out. But we're also dropping things in and out because of capacity. So we often can't answer that. One of the things that I love, and I know I'm on a tempo thing, but I just have to call it out. Capacity planner at Tempo enables you to, without having to understand capacity that you already have. If you have messy data, you can kind of say what you think that capacity is going to be, and do your scenarioing out that way. So it's more about the ability to say, what are my starting assumptions? And if you can give those starting assumptions to an AI, and then you can sort of roughly write what your capacity is, you can start to get to some intelligent scenario planning, even within the context of really horrible data in Jira. That said, Nick is 100% right. You have to get your data organized. And that is something that we're finding we're doing with a lot of people right now. But to say that, I think we can start scenario planning right now. I think we can start doing it with assumptions. And I think that some of the tools that I've seen are doing that quite well.
Thanks for the
I think it's a powerful tool to hammer your point home when you're, for us as consultants on the, talking to a client. It's very easy. And for you all, if you're struggling with, making that, elevating that conversation, bringing it up to leadership from like not to bring everything we talked about back together, but like if it's misalignment, if it's silos, if it's all of these things that we've talked about, you're struggling to bring that up. It's actually pretty simple. Let's assume you're working in Jira. Throw all your stuff or your project, your initiative, your team's work into plans or into something like capacity plan, any sort of tool that is going to help you bring all that data together visually and show where it doesn't make sense. Because I guarantee you it won't make sense if this is one of the first times you're looking at it. It is a super powerful way to say, we are not doing things as good as we could.
Yeah, visibility first, definitely. All right. We have a couple of questions for, or Vondo, sorry. Did you want to answer on that topic? I don't want to skip
No, it's just saying, I agree and say, you just mentioned visibility first and then communication. I cannot say, not just on the organizations, on the work, I would say communication is key for your entire lives.
Yeah. I like it. Yeah. One of the things that, when I asked the question about the, maybe not quite the knee jerk, but the whiplash effect of changing decisions too many times, just made me kind of pity my wife with as ADHD as I am, and the amount of times I'm like, oh, I've got this great new idea. And just imagine that at scale. It's having visibility. Here's why we shouldn't do that thing, Patrick. This is why this is a terrible idea. Right now, that's all in her brain because there's two of us. But when you scale it out, there needs to be that system of record, that taxonomy, that agreed lexicon of what does work look like, so we can talk about it more broadly. All right, so we have a couple of questions, and if anybody has any other ones they want to throw in the chat, go for it. If we don't have time to get to them in the rest of the call, we'll try to get them answered in writing afterwards. The first one I have here was, how do you, let me make sure I'm reading this right, yeah. So how do you get executive buy-in for either more frequent planning reviews or for evaluating what is a sunk cost, and how do we stop doing the blue button when we're not doing buttons anymore, right?
If I can take this one, I think, again, just what you just mentioned, visibility and communication. So show them, how long it's taking them to review, how long their planning cycle is costing them, not, specifically or just how their project or their strategic planning is drifting, but with real examples, from real data, from their real projects, because that speaks way more than any ROI model that you can bring to them. So bring in visibility, bring in data, and making sure, we are bringing the data to show them how much that has been costing them.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that,
that last word there is key. How much is it costing them? I've found that is the most successful way, because especially if you're in like a publicly traded organization, the executive leadership team is going to be beholden to shareholders and board of directors, and they're going to need evidence of the financial impacts for the investors. Right? Sorry, go ahead, Michiko.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is you have to get real with your reporting. So I think that people often don't know how much things really cost. And, again, the beauty of having your labor costs connected into your work, now you can very quickly answer that question. And you can't red, amber, green it. So I think there's a lot of people who are still doing RAG status. And so you're not communicating. You have to decide as an organization that you're going to communicate actual cost as an indicator on the work. And that is often a change that requires some tooling, but also some courage. And then I think, again, all of the scaled agile models are encouraging us to have cadences that are frequent. So a portfolio sync should be happening once a quarter, right? Strategic syncs as well. So if you're waiting until, the end of the quarter to tell somebody something, that's not good. It should be mid-quarter, and you should somehow be able to show how that cost is quantifying versus how what you are trying to achieve is also getting done. So whether that revenue stream is coming in and your costs going out, and so many organizations can't do that. And anyway, that's why I think we need to start looking at these HRIS systems. We need to start thinking about cost and making that as one of the things that elevate on a much more consistent basis.
Well, I think that cost tracking piece, ideal world, yeah, that is like the thing you can point to from a sunk cost or wasted cost. What I've seen work from getting buy-in for more planning cycles or just more dedicated conversations for those things is showing that you're actually already having them, because you almost always are. They're just not planned. They're not part of your process, but you are furiously sending emails, sending chats, ad hoc meetings to continue those planning conversations and get to a point where everyone is semi-aligned or some version of aligned. So you're probably already doing those things. It's easy to package all those activities up though into some readout that says, hey, we're already not wasting, but we're already doing these things ad hoc with no structure. Like, let's get them as part of our process. So it's on the calendar.
That's huge. Yeah, that the squishy middle is already doing the work, right? It's how do we manage upward or get that visibility, or buzzword time, get that alignment, right? All right. So we have a quick poll question that we're going to pop up here, and this is going to, if anything here resonated with you and you want some help getting into a better state of good, you can answer this question here. One of the things that we'll send out, we'll have the deck, we'll have links to everybody's LinkedIn profiles, so you'll be able to message us all directly. We'll have the State of SPM report is going to go out. So there's going to be a lot of materials going out to you. But if you answer this question, it helps us make sure you get routed to the right person as fast as possible. And while people read and answer that question, it basically says, do you want to talk to somebody? I'll just say to everybody, Nick, Michiko, Vando, thank you so much for your time. Your insights and expertise are always greatly appreciated. I always love seeing seeing you guys in person. So when we get to do this as the next best thing, it's great when we just get to kind of nerd out. So thanks for your time. We'll give you each gets 20 seconds left to right on my screen. So Nick, then Michiko, then Vando, 20 seconds of if you want somebody to reach out to you, or a little recap of how you feel.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. So I'll recap a little bit, I guess. For everyone who's on this, this is nothing new for any organization. If you're experiencing this, and if you're at that program level, even the portfolio level, or in the micro hands-on level, like, this is nothing new. It's almost certain that other groups within your organization are going through this too, even those that are very, and again, I guess earmuffs for Agile folks, even those who are hyper following Agile best practices or safe frameworks, or they do all the ceremonies, there's always disconnect, there's always misalignment. It's always work to keep that going. So don't be discouraged of it or about it. But there are certainly things you can do. A lot of the stuff we talked about might help in those conversations. Yeah. And if you want to chat more about, how that can help, how we can help, definitely reach out.
Thank you, Nick. All right, Michiko.
I would say it's your data, and how can you get your taxonomy together in order to get that visibility. And so, yeah, if you want to reach out, I am on LinkedIn. So thanks, everybody. Thank you, Tempo, for great product, well thought out product that was really helping us move forward.
We try. Vando, go ahead.
Sure. If I, leave just one takeaway, is that organizations that are going to be successful and the win is not the ones that have just the best strategy documents. They are the ones that can close this gap between the strategy and execution. And as Michiko and Nick mentioned, I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free, to connect, to reach out. I will add you connecting with every one of you. And also, thanks so much, Tempo and Patrick, for being an amazing MEC as usual. I'm glad to be here.
Cheers, everyone. Well, thanks for your time, and everybody out in the wild, good luck going into your next call, and hopefully you can take some of this away with you.